to the cloud. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me. A slightly later start. Welcome, Aristeo and Khani, Hannibal, Bella, Esti, and welcome, Bobby Weinberg. Today, we are going to get back to what we've done now for, I don't know how many months it's been, but the Pardes, the orchard of Torah, taking a verse or a section of the Torah portion and examining it from the different angles, different beautiful angles that Torah has to offer. And Pardes, as we've said many times, is an acronym for Pshat, which means simple meaning, Remez, which is the secret, the hints. Drush is that which we can derive from the words of the Torah. Sod are the secrets of Torah. And we'll try, I don't know if we get to all four angles of every idea, but we try to at least get a couple angles of a section of Torah during our Wednesday afternoon Torah study. I do want to mention it is a late start today, and the reason is because, thank God, my wife and I were blessed with a baby daughter. My wife gave birth on 2 days ago, the 7th of Sivan, the second day of Shavuos, in the afternoon. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, the baby's doing well, the mother is doing well. You know, speaking of thanking Hashem, so I was, as my wife was giving birth, so what am I to do? You know, it's not much I can do. So I was saying Tehillim. I was reading the Psalms and praying for her, reading out loud so she could hear. And the baby was born as I was reciting the Psalm number 145. Is it 45 or 46? I think it's Psalm number 145, which is the Ashrei. The most common song of praise we say is the Ashrei. And that's when the baby was born. It wasn't planned that way. I was kind of making my way through the Tehillim. And that's when the baby was born, the song of praise. So every child born is a miracle, nothing short of a miracle. And I thank Hashem for this beautiful miracle. The baby does not yet have a name. Feel free to message me with ideas. But the baby will be named tomorrow morning at the Torah. And so any ideas, please feel free to share. I could also just go to Google and search nice girls' names for Jews and get results that way. So with that, let's jump into the Torah study today. We are reading this week's Torah portion is the longest Torah portion of the year, the Torah portion of Naso. It is said the Torah portion of Naso, the longest Torah portion of the year, almost always falls out in the Shabbos after Shavuos. We celebrate the giving of Torah. Why is that? Why is that? And actually, we're coming from a series of short Torah portions. As if you've been following the end of the book of Vayikra, especially as the in a leap year, so we don't have as many combined Torah portions, was very short Torah portions. And yet the week after Siva, the week after Shavuos, we have the longest Torah portion of the year. One of the ideas given is to show that we cherish the Torah. When you love something, you're not looking to cut it short, right? If those of us who like sports, right? So when the game goes into overtime, it's exciting. You get extra, right? You get extra for the ticket for the price of admission. If you're excited about something, then you're happy about the overtime. You're happy about the extra, unlike a job which you don't like. And then when you're told, I need you to stay an extra hour, that's painful. But Torah is exciting to us and enjoyable to us. So the week after we receive it, we say, bring it on. Give us the longest parsha you can get. And that's the Torah portion of Naso. And within the Torah portion of Naso, there are several aliyahs which are longer than the others. And today's Torah reading, today being Wednesday, so the Torah reading of today is a very long Torah reading. And it includes several very fascinating elements of Judaism, some of which are not very common. The mitzvah of the sota, the suspected wife, which has a whole unique process of being brought up to the temple and drinking a certain water, which is, again, very unique and a fascinating area of Judaism, which we don't see nowadays. But that is the law of Sota, which is in Wednesday's Torah reading, or the fourth Torah reading of which is today's Torah reading. That is followed by the laws of the Nazir, the Nazir of which is the person who chooses to let their hair grow and to stay away from wine and not come in contact with any dead body. Our sages tell us, why is it that this is all in this week's Torah portion? Not in this week, in today's Torah portion, that is. Sages tell us, why is it that the Nazir is listed in the Torah right after the Sota? Nothing is random. Why is it that the suspected woman, the woman suspected of adultery, is in the Torah right before the Nazir, right before the person who refrains, a man or a woman, who refrains from wine and lets their hair grow? And the Talmud says, and Rashi quotes this, is that because Haroya Soita Bikilkula, if someone sees the Sota in her disgrace, because if the woman was indeed unfaithful, then there's a certain publicity to it that the process causes. And it's disgraceful. It's embarrassing. If a person sees that, Yazir Atzma min Hayayin, such a person should separate themselves from wine, because it is wine that caused her and whoever it is she sinned with to go down the path of sin. And therefore, that's the link. That if you see one who sees the Sota should say, okay, I am becoming a Nazir, I am separating myself from wine. It's not a law that a person has to follow. It's more of a lesson, and I think a very important lesson, a profoundly important lesson, which is, what is our reaction when we see someone else in their failings? What is our reaction? And today there's so many ways we see that. Unfortunately, it used to be, if you walk down the street and you saw someone in their failures, okay, so that's how it used to be. But nowadays, the seeing someone else's failure could be hearing about it, could be reading about it online, could be coming across it in social media. And how do we react when we see someone else's failure, when we see someone else's shortcoming? And the Torah tells us, if you see someone else's shortcoming, you have to ask yourself, what does that mean to me? Because we're all flawed. We all make mistakes. And very often the mistake that someone else makes, even if I wouldn't make that very specific mistake, but I'll make a similar mistake. I'll make a mistake which comes from a similar place. And so therefore the Torah says, you see someone else's failing, challenge yourself to be better. Don't spend, if the only response you have to someone else's mistake is to look down at them. So firstly, that's itself a sin. That's itself a sin, to look down at someone else. So how much more so if I then share that information with someone else, then it's another sin of Lashon Hara. But even if not, suppose I don't look down at them. Suppose I don't turn to Lashon Hara, so I say, I came through this unscathed. I read something flawed about someone else, and I did not, and I chose not to, and I didn't share it with anybody, and I'm not even looking down at them. So now I responded to this as I should. Because they don't know. The Torah says the best way, the only way you've succeeded is if you turn inward and say, how can I myself avoid making that mistake? How can I learn to make sure that I don't make that mistake myself? And that's the success of seeing someone else's shortcomings. So that's what links those two elements, the Sota and the Nazir. But I want to now jump to the end of today's Torah reading, and that is the blessing, the Kohen blessing, which is found on at the very end of today's Torah reading. If you're following in the actual Chumash, you can find it chapter 6 of the book of Bamidbar, verse number 22. And I'll bring it up on the screen just a second. Okay, let me bring up share the screen. Why can't I share the text? I'm sorry, I'm using a different computer than usual, and I'm trying to figure out how to share the screen. I guess I'm unable to. That's weird.
You have to ask nicely, Rabbi.
This is bizarre. Why? Usually I share screen and it offers me the internet that is open. I have the Chabad.org screen open and it's not letting me share it. Let me try one more time and then we'll just move on if it doesn't work. And now share the screen. Okay, it's not letting me. So instead, I'll just read from the text. And you're welcome to pull it up on your own phone or your computer or whatever you're using to follow. And again, Naso chapter 6, verse number 22. Says the Pasuk, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, and God spoke to Moshe saying, Daber al Aaron ve'al banav lemor, speak to Aaron and to his sons lemor to say, Ko tevarchu es bnei Yisrael, so shall you bless the Jewish people. Amor lahem, you should tell them, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and protect you. Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May God shine his face, his countenance upon you and give you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God lift his countenance to you and establish peace for you. These are the blessings which the Kohen is commanded to give to the people. What a beautiful section of Torah. You know, this Torah portion is so, it has 176 verses. So it's wonderful to have so much Torah to study this week, but it's important not to miss out on some of the beauty. And this is, if there's ever a section of Torah which is beautiful, it's right here, where God says, I want you to bless each other. I want the Kohanim, they are commanded to bless the Jewish people. Now, there's different customs of when the Kohen, the Kohanim bless the people. In Ashkenaz circles here in America, this blessing is reserved for the holidays. So we give the bracha on the holidays. In Sephardic circles, they do it every Shabbos. I think some places every single day. And if you go to Israel and Jerusalem, and they're also, it's done by everyone on a daily basis. But let's focus on the blessings for just a moment. And we start with Rashi. You study Torah, you start with Rashi. Rashi says, Yevarechecha, may God bless you. So Rashi says something interesting. Yevarechecha, what exactly is this blessing referring to? Sheyisbarchu nechasecha, that your belongings should be blessed. Your materials, that which you own, should be blessed. That's the first blessing, Yevarechecha. And then V'yishmerecha, God should bless you and protect you. Protect you. What is the blessing of protection? Says Rashi, Sheyalo yavoyu alecha shoididim lito mamoncha. That you should not have, that there should not be robbers, should not come to take that which you have. As Rashi continues to say, one of the differences between a human being and God, and there are many, but one of them is that when a person gives a gift to another human being, so that's it, I gave you the gift. There's nothing more I can do to protect it. And if someone now steals it from you, all right, I gave the gift, and now it's up to you to protect it. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God is different. God is both the giver of the gifts in life and the protector of those gifts. And therefore we say, Yivarechecha Hashem Yishmerecha, the same one who gives us the gifts of life and within life should also protect those gifts from being harmed. Yair Hashem panav elecha v'yichuneka, says Rashi, what is the second blessing? God should shine his countenance upon you. Says Rashi, Yirah lecha panim shoichakois, God should show you a smiling countenance. Panim suhuvas, a bright face. That we all understand the difference between someone who looks at you and someone who smiles at you. That someone, when it's a genuine smile, at least, that a genuine smile is a different experience. I'm going to do a shameless plug right now. That is that even though I like shopping in different places, I shop different places, but the shop that I enjoy most is Trader Joe's. That's just my personal preference. My pre-Shabbos shopping, I do at Trader Joe's. Why? I don't know what they have, but somehow all of the employees there are shining happy faces, and it's a different shopping experience. Even if it happens to you, price is good too, but that's not why I go there. It's because Yair, the shining faces, makes the whole experience different. And so therefore, the second blessing is Yair Hashem Panav Elecha. God should give a shining face, a smiling face, and we should somehow feel that. It's not just that you should feel that connection to God, that God is shining down upon us. Sometimes we feel, right now I am in the aftermath, as I mentioned earlier, of having a healthy baby born to us. So you sense it. So then it's easier to feel the goodness and the smiling face and things are good. Sometimes it's not as easy. And the blessing we have is that we should always feel that. We should feel that sense of joy of not just that God is here. Okay, we believe God is here, but that God is shining down upon us with a smiling face. And that relationship is a whole different type of connection. And finally, Yisa Hashem Panav Elecha. Yisa Hashem, what does it mean? God should lift his face or his countenance. What does that mean? So let's look to Rashi. Rashi says, Yichbosh Kaso. God should overcome his anger. Any anger. And again, whenever we talk about God's emotions, it's important to realize that we're using human descriptions because that's the only way we can really relate to God. God doesn't have the human spectrum of emotions the way we do. But nevertheless, that's the way we relate to God. And that's how God encourages us to relate to God. And so therefore we say, God, you should overcome your anger. The Talmud says something very interesting. The Talmud says that Rabbi Yishmael, the high priest, said, when I went into the Holy of Holies, he was one of the holiest high priests we've had. And he said, I went into the Holy of Holies once, and somehow I saw the presence of God. And then God said to me, Yishmael beni, Yishmael my son, Barucheni, bless me. God said to Yishmael, high priest, bless me. Now that's a pretty challenging task to tell a human being. How could a human being bless God? So the words Yishmael said were these words. He said, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be your will. Sheyichbeshu rachamecha eskascha, that your mercy should overcome your anger. The Talmud goes on to say, again, this is rather mystical. Talmud goes on to say that there is a fraction of a second every day in which there is divine anger. Again, how are we to understand this? But there is a fraction of a second every single day in which there is divine anger. And that anger is explosively powerful, but it's because it's a fraction of a second, the world withstands the anger of God. But the rest of the time, the God operates primarily through mercy. Talmud says, just because we're mentioning it, it says that Bilam, the wicked Bilam, when he was intending to destroy the Jewish people, his mechanism was, we're going to read about this a few parshas from now, his mechanism was because he knew when that fraction of a second was, and he felt he could channel the divine anger that exists in that fraction of a second to use its destructive force against the Jewish people. And the way that was overcome is God said on that day that Bilam intended to use it, even that fraction of a second of anger didn't exist. Anyways, but this is the song. This is the verse number 26. Yisa Hashem Panav Elecha, says Rashi, Yichbosh Kaso. The third blessing the Kohen gives is that you should overcome any anger. And let's be honest, the world gives God many reasons to be angry. And nevertheless, we tell God, let your mercy overcome your anger. V'yasem lecha shalom, and let there be peace established upon you. The Rabbi in Asicha points out that the concluding words of the blessing is peace, because peace is called the vessel of all blessing. And that is, if you have whatever item, liquid or something you have, and you want to pour it, but if there's nothing to collect it, so it doesn't matter how much you have, it falls and it scatters and it goes to waste. You have to have a vessel. Whatever blessing, whatever it is that you're going to pour for another person, the only way they can receive that blessing is the vessel. Says the Rabbi, the vessel for all of the blessings in life is shalom, is peace. If a person doesn't have shalom, So that even if you have all of the previous blessings, you have blessing on your belongings, and you have protection, and you have a smiling face, and you have overcoming. If you don't have peace, you don't have the vessel to collect the blessings of life. And that's why the conclusion of this most profound blessing, the one blessing God commands us to give to one another, concludes with shalom, because shalom is the key, is the vessel of all blessing. I'll share one more idea from Kabbalah. I was reading an idea from the Zohar on this topic. So there's a lot of halacha about this. There's all sorts of laws, a whole section of law about how the Kohen has to bless, the different process of the Kohen blessing the congregation, how the Kohen stands, how the congregation stands, if any Kohen is disqualified from giving a blessing, if any congregants are disqualified from hearing the blessing. It's a very interesting area of Jewish law. But the Zohar talks about it. And it says, the Zohar says like this: it is a mitzvah that the Kohen should bless the nation every day, bizkifas etzbaos. One of the things the Kohen does is he raises his fingers into the air, and by making the blessing. Why? The 10 fingers, there's a certain mysticism. Of course, if you've studied Kabbalah, you know that every physical reality is a reflection of a spiritual truth. Everything that we see physically is because there's a certain spiritual truth behind it. It's spiritual DNA. And the physicality is just a physical expression of a spiritual truth. So what is the spirituality of the hands? We often hear about the mind and the heart, the eyes, the ability to see and to hear. What about the hands? It says the Zohar, the hands are the 10 fingers. The 10 fingers, which are 5 on one side, 5 on the other, represent the 10 spheros, the 10 spiritual characteristics. And when we speak about even the power of 10, the Kabbalah talks extensively about the power of 10, the idea that it represents the completion of God's expression. Within 10, you have the right and the left. That's why when the Kohen blesses the people, I am actually a Kohen, so I did this past week. When the Kohen blesses the people, the right, he raises both hands in the air. All 10 fingers are raised and spread out, but the right hand extends over the left hand. The right hand is meant to be slightly higher than the left, because right represents kindness, left represents severity. And even though both kindness and severity are essential and both godly, but we raise kindness slightly above severity. We want kindness to be the more dominant feature than severity, which is toughness, which is discipline, which is, again, all good, all necessary. But the kindness should be more dominant. And then then he goes on more. The Zohar talks more about the right and the left and the 10, how when the Kohen raises his palms and his 10 fingers, the divine presence rests upon them. Think about it like flipping a switch. You flip a switch and the light goes on. The Kohen raises his hands and the divine presence descends and rests, and then through the hands of the Kohen to bless the people. It's a very powerful concept. But then the Zohar says like this. He says, for this reason, a person should not randomly raise both hands up in the air with outstretched fingers, because it is a powerful action which can elicit the divine presence, and therefore it should only be done for holy reasons. I'll be honest, I read this morning. I'd never seen this before. Never seen before that there's that one should avoid raising both hands with fingers outstretched, similar to the Kohen. I mean, I'll show you now just because it's for the purpose of learning. But basically, the Zohar is saying that one should not raise both hands up in the air, because it has a certain that action has divinity to it. And the way the Zohar says, it shouldn't be done for no reason. So if a person is doing it in Torah study, if a person is lifting their hands up in prayer, then it's okay. Then it's appropriate to draw down the divine presence. But says the Zohar, there's something holy about raising 10 fingers up in the air, because that it can elicit the divine presence onto oneself and then through oneself onto others. So if one does so with holy intention in Torah study or prayer, or as we know, many people have different situations in which they bless one another or bless their children. Many fathers Friday night bless their children and will stretch out their hands to do so. Okay, then it's being done for the right reason. But otherwise, to simply raise both hands up and with, especially with outstretched fingers, is something the Zohar says one should avoid doing unless it's part of a holy act in some form or another. So that's what the Zohar says in connection to the Birchas Kohanim and to the divine, incredible power that the Birchas Kohanim has, that the priestly blessing has, and how it should affect the way we think and how we behave. All right, going to stop here. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Have a great Shabbos. And I look forward to continuing our Torah studies next Wednesday, God willing. Now I'm going to turn off the recording.
Thank you.